Have you ever sat at an airport gate, looked out at a massive airliner, and wondered, how does that 200-ton machine go from completely silent and still to gracefully landing hundreds of miles away? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain. We're taking a full flight in the incredible Boeing 787 Dreamliner, from a dead cold start all the way to the final approach.
It all starts right here, just silence. The screens are blank, the systems are asleep. Right now, it's not even really an airplane. It's just a machine sitting on the ground, waiting for that first command to begin its transformation.
And with that, with the first flick of a switch, our journey begins. Let's do this.
Okay, phase one is all about waking up this giant. We're going to give it power, get our bearings, and take a super quick tour of the three main control areas you need to know on this amazing flight deck.
Everything, and I mean everything, starts up here on the overhead panel. You can think of this as the master circuit breaker for the entire aircraft. This is where we turn on the battery, connect to ground power, and start managing the core systems like hydraulics and lighting. This is where the plane's pulse, well, this is where it begins.
Now look right in front of us, in our main line of sight. This is the glare shield, and this is the primary way we talk to the autopilot. Basically, every command for our speed, our heading, and altitude for the entire flight is going to be dialed in right here. It's our command center.
And right down here between the seats, we've got the pedestal. This is where the muscle and the voice of the aircraft live. You've got the engine throttles for all that power, the fuel switches to feed those massive engines, and all the controls for talking to air traffic control and the rest of the world.
So the plane is awake, now what? Well, now we have to tell it the plan. We need to tell it the story of our journey, and that all happens in the Flight Management System, or the FMS. It looks super complicated, I know, but it's really just having a conversation with the plane's brain.
And that conversation basically follows 5 core steps. First, you tell it, hey, this is where we are right now. Then, and this is where we're going. Next, we give it our performance data. You know, how heavy are we with all the fuel, passengers, and cargo? That lets it calculate the critical speeds we need for takeoff. And finally, we tell it how we're going to climb and descend. Once we've answered those questions, the computer knows the entire game plan from start to finish.
All right, the digital plan is locked in. Now it's time to make it physical. This part is all about the real-world actions of getting this massive piece of machinery moving and then gracefully, somehow, lifting it into the sky. You know, getting to the runway isn't just driving there. It's a precise sequence. First, we fire up the APU, the auxiliary power unit, for our own independent power. Then we push back from the gate and bring those huge engines to life. After that, we configure the wings for takeoff by setting the flaps and adjusting the trim, so the plane is perfectly balanced. Only then do we start our taxi.
Now, as we're thundering down the runway, something really important happens at exactly 80 knots. The auto throttle node switches to hold. You can see it confirmed on what's called the flight mode annunciator. This is crucial because it locks in the takeoff power, it hands full control back to the pilot, and prevents any accidental power changes at the most critical moment of the flight. It's a huge safety feature.
And this number, for today's flight, it's 150 knots. This is our V2 speed. The FMS calculated this for us. It's the minimum safe speed we need to climb away if, worst case, an engine fails right after takeoff. That's why setting this number in the autopilot speed window before we even start rolling is absolutely non-negotiable. It's our safety net.
And then you hear the call. Rotate. The pilot gently pulls back on the control column, and just like that, 200 tons of metal, fuel, and people defies gravity and lifts into the air. What a moment. So, once we're airborne, the gear is up, the flaps are retracted, the entire character of the flight just changes. The intense manual work is done, and now the heavy lifting is handed over to the plane's incredibly sophisticated automation. It's like watching an automated ballet.
And this ballet is basically governed by 2 main modes, LNAV and VNAV. LNAV, or lateral navigation, handles all the left and right stuff. You can think of it as the where. It meticulously follows that route we programmed into the FMS. Then you have VNAV, or vertical navigation. It's in charge of the up and down. It's the how high and how fast, managing our climb, our cruise altitude, and our descent with incredible efficiency.
Which, if you think about it, brings up a pretty fascinating question. How in the world does this automated system, cruising along at 39,000 feet, that's 7 miles up,
know the exact moment it needs to start heading down to arrive perfectly for the approach. It can't just be a guess, right?
The answer is something called the top of descent point, or T/D. The FMS is constantly calculating this precise spot in the sky. It's looking at our weight, the winds, the arrival route, and when we hit that TD point, the plane can literally pull the throttles back to idle and just coast all the way down. It's like taking your foot off the gas at the top of a huge hill, incredibly smooth and super fuel efficient. So as we get closer to our destination, the automation has put us in the right ballpark, but now the pilot's workload starts to ramp way up again. This is the final approach, where everything has to come together perfectly for a safe landing.
The final approach is like a tightly choreographed dance in the sky. As you can see, the plane follows this sequence of waypoints, and each one has a specific altitude and a specific speed target. This path gradually slows us down, it steps us down in altitude, and it lines us up perfectly with the runway, all before we capture those final guidance signals that are going to lead us right to the runway threshold. And in these last few moments, there's a flurry of checks and actions to make sure we're ready. We set the go-around altitude, just in case. The landing gear comes down with that familiar thud. We set full flaps to give us lift at these low approach speeds. The speed brakes are armed to help us slow down on the runway, and the auto brake is set. Every single item on this list is a critical safety gate we have to pass through. So just think about that for a second. We've gone from a completely dark, silent cockpit to a fully configured aircraft on final approach, ready to touch down. What's the real skill here? It's not just about flying with your hands on the controls. No, the true art of flying a modern airliner is mastering the automation. It's knowing exactly what the plane is doing, why it's doing it, and what it's going to do next. That's what connects it all.